Continuing our easy Blender modeling tutorial, here I'm beginning the proper texturing of the model in Gimp. So in the previous video I did the UV map, the UV layout, and the labels. Now I'm going to add the actual textures. So I've opened my scan of the Cheerios box there. I select it all, copy it, and then edit paste into the XCF file I'm working on for the texture. So I have to scale it down. I don't know how much I have to scale it down, so I try it again and again until I get it. So pulling it down with the move tool there, cut it out, and then I'm going to add some transparency to the markings layer for the box's texture, because it's much easier to line up textures that are partly transparent over the UV layout. So I keep knocking the size down here until it fits, basically. In the end, I settled on 340 pixels across. There, I'm using the move tool to line it up. For whatever reason, I decided to line up the bottom edge of these instead of the top edge. It was sort of a, I don't know, intuitive thing. That meant that I had to do some cleanup later. And the left side I never got around to, because the left and right sides were strangely irregular in shape, actually, even though they should be exactly the same. And as I said in the previous video, that can be a strange problem you can run into with Blender. But you get around it by simply editing the UV map accordingly, so that at least everything's to scale. So here I just copied and pasted the back side texture, and its width will be 340 pixels, because I want everything to be consistent. Even if Blender fights me a little bit on this, I'll make it conform, because that's what you can do. You're basically allowed to edit to your heart's content once Blender gives you your defaults. But here I'm still in Gimp, still putting together the texture. I'm going to line up the bottom edge rather than the top again for the back side. This is all just using the move tool. You do have to make sure that you're moving the pasted image and not the layer or anything else. And notice the layer isn't anchored yet. So here I'm double checking my scale to make sure it's 340 across. Close the original. Then I open the left side. One of the interesting things about Gimp, which I like, is that if you paste another layer in, it will anchor the previous layer. Because notice I forgot to anchor the texture from the back side. So when I pasted in the left side, it automatically anchored it, and then the unanchored layer became the left side. Obviously, it'll anchor to the layer immediately below where it was pasted. So I've scaled the left side on the first try by copying the height of the front and back sides. And as you can see, it doesn't line up correctly in terms of width with the UV map. And the right will also be a little off, even though I scale it to match the front and back sides. Scale again. Move tool again. Drag it into place before you anchor it. And see, it still doesn't match that UV map, so I'm going to have to adjust the UV map in Blender. which means I'll also have to update the XCF file. But in the meantime, I'll save this as my XCF of the box texture, which of course will not be what I'll use. I'll end up exporting this as a targa eventually. But first I have to add the bottom and top sides. Because I did the labels earlier, it's obvious where I put them. So edit copy, edit paste between the two files. Move. Zoom in with the magnification tool down there. And the move tool got it into place on the first try because I already have the correct width of the box. So the fact that I didn't put in the thickness precisely doesn't matter so much. So now finally the bottom texture. Actually, finally the top texture here. Previous side was the bottom texture, of course. You can tell this is the top because it has the expiration date there that I've blanked to zeros so that this box doesn't have any particular era. Obviously, you could retexture the box if you had much older boxes to scan from like the 30s or 40s, depending on when they introduced these metric measurements, which probably wouldn't have been in the 30s or 40s. So then I killed the transparency there, or the opacity, over on the right, and now I'm exporting to Targa to create the first of the textures. And I'm going to not use RLE compression because sometimes that's incompatible with certain programs. There's no real need to use it on such a small file. So next we will import all of that into Blender.